Hello, welcome to Fiber Trek. My name is Sarah. This is episode 41. I am back outside and totally fending off the midgies, but I think I can make it. I'm hoping that I won't be driven insane in the next 25 minutes. My little friend here, the chublet, I don't know if you can see him on the feeder, is here. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you can see him. There he goes. I'm sorry, that fence is right in your way. Anyway, that is my little fledgling newbie nuthatch, rose-breasted nuthatch, although he's kind of got dull colors. And he's very bold, very social, and he loves suet. In fact, when we went on our recent canoe trip, I made my husband gird a tree with metal so the raccoons couldn't get up it, so I could put suet out because the chublet loves suet. And I was worried that he wouldn't have another food source, and that's complete hubris on my part. But anyway, the suet survived, so did Chubby. There he is. So I've already been out here recording a little bit, and he has flown into my head. And there was a chipmunk out earlier that he was having a skirmish with about stuff. So he's just a ham. Anyway, back to regularly scheduled programming. Although he's a little irresistible. Sorry, that's awful close, isn't it? Let me get it. Oh. There. Hi. So, episode 41. I have a interesting agenda for you this week. And I'm sorry if I get distracted, but there's a lot to look out here. So the ducks come up on the porch. There's Chubby. There's, Chippy. So I will do my best to stay focused. That's the neighbor's dog. And yeah, so welcome and introductions. We had a couple people introduce themselves since I last recorded, and I want to thank them for doing that. We had Sunday Knits, who at that point in time was talking about how it was 104 degrees in Austin, Texas, where she's from. Now, I was bemoaning the 85-degree weather, and granted, it got up to, 90 this past Saturday. But really, 104? I guess, it's all relative, of course. And, but I was kind of like, 104 degrees? No, thank you. I had Wild Pony too, who's from Sierras, California, and she had a very lovely, kind, and encouraging post and introduction. So thank you very much for that. I have typically everybody who posts in the in the threads and in our board has been so supportive and helpful both of each other, of the content of the podcast, of the projects of the podcast, and Fiber Trek. So it is great to receive that type of feedback. I won't deny that at all. And then I had Death from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She is come over from New Hampshire Knits and is intrigued by the Shackleton Along and maybe doing some spinning. So welcome to all of you. If you feel so inclined, we do have a Ravelry group, and you're welcome to join it and introduce yourself. That is where a lot of the Shackleton Along chatter is happening. You can also find me on Instagram as FiberTrek TV and on the blog at fibertrek.wordpress.com. And I'm considering Periscope, although I'm not there yet. We'll see. So I have today lined up, I've got a couple different segments and different ways that I've put content into the podcast. I have On the Radar, which I want to talk a little bit about, some things which are fiber related that are not project related. I have whips and FOs. I have the Shackleton Along. I have a pseudo Textiles in Time. So the Textiles in Time is kind of Shackleton-esque, and it comes via Daisy Knitter, who had a really interesting post on the Shackleton Craft Along thread. So I'll refer to that. And I also did a small insertion for the Shackleton Along about Shackleton's original intent and what this journey was about. So seeing is that I talked to Jo of Shiny Bees, and she and I are still sussing out details on how we want to deal with this. And I figured we're still sailing to Buenos Aires. We don't get to Buenos Aires until October 26th. So it's smooth sailing. Like, we have nothing to worry about. I believe he leaves for South Georgia December 5th. And so she and I are still working out details on that. But I thought that I would insert a small piece about Shackleton's original, like I said, intent and what this expedition was all about. It also has, if you're watching, if you're listening, there are pictures. There's pictures of Shackleton, the Endurance, a map of the original route that he was going to do, and pictures of the dogs. So I debated about that because, as you know, many of you know, I'm exceptionally sensitive about animals. There was like a whole genre of children's books I never read. And it's not that I deny it, but it's more like I don't know. Dogs especially. So anyway, I didn't include the dog picture originally. And then I was like, and that's half the reason I've read parts of the book, but I haven't watched really the movie. But I thought, what a disservice to not give credit where credit is due. So I had a little ethical quandary with myself about the dogs and a little bit of a moment, but I did include some great pictures of the sled dogs that they took. And you can learn more about that in the clip that I'll insert at the end. So, yeah, so we'll talk Shackleton, we'll talk historic Shackleton, and we'll talk textiles and time Shackleton. And I have a little bit of sewing I wanted to share, and I'm going to just throw that in with finished objects. And did I thank all of you for the great connections? I know it's broken record moment, but thank you so much. Totally does not go unappreciated and is totally noticed. I've been traveling, and I was on the water with my husband for 4.5 days, as I said, I think before. We were paddling on Flagstaff, and at the very end of this, there is a small movie about our trip and the wildlife that we saw. So you can take a look at that if you're interested in some of the wildlife. And I can't remember where I was going with that. Came and went. So let's get started. As things come to me, hopefully I'll remember. So on the radar, retreat news. Highlands on the Fly is happening. I know. Bum, bum, bum. The same weekend as Rhinebeck. How is that possible? Who does that? Well, I had to do it. I'm sorry. Nuthatch on the radar. So we had to do that because Heather of Highland Handmaids, who I co-host this retreat with, has a show the following weekend, which is when we usually do that. So we went ahead and did it, and we just believed in the spirit of knitters and spinners and fiber enthusiasts to come, and they have, and I'm very excited. We have about 30 people signed up. We still have space. The night talk, I will be giving a talk, and I know, fascinating. That's all by choice, though. You don't have to come to the talk if you come to the retreat. We have a vendor market. We have Fiber Nymph will be vending. I'm very excited about that. Heather of Highland Handmaids, very excited about that. Has Snow Country Yarns coming from the Presque Isle area. She has Lester Longwools and Jacob, some gorgeous yarns. Main Yarn and Fiber Supply, Jody Clayton, an amazing procurer of local yarns. Bybrook Farm is Michelle. She raises Romneys up in the county. And Shipyard Point Glass. This is just to name a few that I've secured. So if you are at all interested in doing something different and a flyaway retreat, just throwing caution to the wind and being whimsical, and then sign up and come and hang out with us in Northern Maine at the New England Outdoor Center. We're right on Millinocket Lake. There's a gorgeous view of the mountain. And yeah, so you can find out more about that through the links in the Ravelry thread, or you can also give New England Outdoor Center a call. The other thing on the radar that came up for me is Knit British is doing a single breed swatch along, or knit along, swatch knit along. And I think I'm going to participate that. She's going to use this as a complement to some of the goings on for Wovember, which is a celebration of wool that happens in November. I think that was founded by Felix Ford of Knit Sonic. Anyway, the Knit Sonic and Louise of Knit British are my 2 points when I'm following the Wovember action. And I will be focusing on Herdwick. I've wanted to work with this breed for a long time, partly because They return to the same hill where they were lambed. They don't require fences. They're wicked, adorable, and they're on the periphery of soft and squishy for sure. So you know that soft and squishy isn't always a determining factor for me in the yarns that I choose to work with, and that it's an exploration in texture and an exploration in use, and also my personal dedication to diversity. And I know I've talked about Deb Robeson before in her breed specific video that I bought where she starts to choke up a little bit. I always choke up a little bit too, and certainly don't want to lose all these different, very interesting, intriguing breeds of animals. All those species need their heroes and heroines. They're, what's the word I'm looking for? Not heroes and heroines, they're champions. That's it. So for that particular Swatchalung, I will be championing the Herdwick. So anyway, I'm really excited about that Knit British. So thanks for putting that out there for participation. The other thing on the radar, and I'll probably throw this into Textiles in Time. For some reason, I wrote it down in my notes here, is Daisy Knits has a great post about an exhibition happening at a local library in regards to Shackleton and knitwear. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on in Shackleton. I don't know why it was there, but. So let's go right to WIPs. I'm going to turn on my iPad while I have a minute because I shut it off after I already recorded and then decided that I was still too tangential. And I think the woodpecker's here. So works in progress. Got a lot going on here, Sarah. So I have works in progress are the Angostura. I know I should be eating tons of crow, right? Because I was like, I'll have that done in a week and a half. That was like a month ago. And this is a pattern by Isolde Teague. It's a vest, and it's knit in 2 pieces with a traveling cable. I'm doing this out of 13 Mile Farm yarn in a dark or deep plum. These are all natural dyed yarns from Montana. I think their flock is BFL based, Blue Face Leicester based, but I'm not 100% sure. So I've just finished the traveling stitch section. There are 2. They run up the bust line, and I will knit, and then I'll divide for the shoulders. And then there's another set of cables on the shoulders. I'm knitting this on a size 8, and sorry, everything's falling down. I can only put so many certain things on the deck because the ducks come up here, and then they do their business up here, and then there's duck business on the deck, and I can't put things down on the deck. So this is knit on a size US 8, 5 millimeter, and yeah, I'm taking this to class tonight. So hopefully I'll be able to make my way up to where I divide for the shoulders. Really love that yarn and look forward to investing in another sweater, like a full sweater's worth. That comes in sport, worsted, and a bulky weight. So I also have on the needles Cockatoo Bray by Kate Davies. Oh, sorry about that. Which is this one right here. And I'm knitting this in Starcroft Tide. So this is Nash Island fleece. Colorway is pine cone. It's a little bit darker, I think, than regular pine cone because we got distracted. So it's almost a chestnutty bark color. I'm knitting this on a size US 3. I'm knitting the sleeves to start so that when I'm done the body, I can just go right into the yoke. And this will be steeped. And it's kind of a warm-up Shackleton for me. I'll talk a little bit about my Shackleton project during the Shackleton craft along part, but this is a warm-up Shackleton. So I'm knitting this on a size 3. I'm getting highly disorganized. Okay. I think that's a US 3.75. US 3.25, 3 1/4. I'm sorry, it's a US 3 and 3 1/4 millimeter needle. So I've made, that's modification I've made for that is, sorry, I'm outside and so wind is blowing and things are moving. I went up a needle size for this to get gauge. And I'm actually, I think some of the comments I read in project notes were, oh, the boring stockinette, but I'm actually just loving working with this yarn, and it's a great project for just sitting in class and knitting, because you just go around and around and increase when you need to increase, and that's that. So that is Cockatoo Bray. That's all I have on the needles. I really started to clean the needles off when I was getting ready to cast on Cockatoo Bray, but I'll probably be casting on a shawl to knit along with that. And I had originally intended to start my Shackleton project, and that's shifted, and so that's why there's only those 2 projects. But as soon as Angostura is finished, I will probably cast on another shawl. So we'll see what happens. Speaking of shawls, I have finished objects. I have Film Strip by Subi Samola done. I know. You're like, holy smokes. I don't mean that I'm done. I mean the color. So I knit this as part of the Yarns at Yinhu asymmetrical or asymmetrical, which is to knit a garment or sew a garment or do something that has asymmetry within it. So I chose this because of the asymmetry of the color and the design. And every year, as I had said to Sarah, you know, this cowl pushes me further. So last year it was just asymmetry. And so I like things symmetrical and etc. And this year it's color. And these colors are like a turquoise blue and a chartreusey green, lime green. Well, it's more greeny yellow than lime. And almost neon, dare I say. And I had originally thought that I wasn't going to like it. It's not that I don't like the color or the yarn, but I thought the contrast was too much for me. But once I finished this section on the bottom, which is a larger block of the green color, it came together for me. So I'm going to keep this and wear it. And yeah, I was actually surprised. So this is Foster Sheep Farm. It's Romney Wensleydale, 80 Romney, 20 Wensleydale. I did change up a little bit of the direction. I clipped each of these color changes. I clipped and wove in the ends. I couldn't achieve the edge I wanted with carrying the colors, carrying the yarn up the side. So it was fine. I clip, and then I'd sew, weave in. So I didn't have to do it all at the end. And it just achieved a better edge for me. So, and I love this edge. This edge is the bottom edge. Let's just knit 2 together and then turn your work, slip with yarn in front. So, done. The sun's coming out, which is good. I also finished, hold on to your hats, kids, the waffle cream socks. These are Serenity Farm alpaca Corriedale. I think it's 20% alpaca, 80 Corriedale. It's in gray. They're absolutely stunning, mostly because of design and yarn. I just love the texture, and I like the classic look of the gray. There's a traveling stitch that runs up. It's not a traveling stitch. It's like what's the word I'm looking for? You knit through the back loop on these stitches, and then it creates this like cabled relief look. And I also love the broken rib pattern. So this is the yarn from Granny Sheep. If you are on the Rab thread, Granny Sheep sent me this yarn, and I procured more and knit these up. So, which is a good thing, because I just learned Claire of New Hampshire Knits has a new design coming out, new sock design coming out, and I need to get another pair of socks on the needles for next year. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention this and on the radar. Blacker Yarns is releasing their limited edition anniversary yarn or birthday yarn, which is called Cornish Tin. I believe that's coming out September 12th. I want to bring this into my stash. And the reason I thought about that when I was talking about Claire's new sock pattern is that it comes in a fingering and a DK weight, and I think I'm going to buy enough fingering to do a pair of socks, and then a DK weight worth of sweater. So let me see if I can tell you what the Cornish Tin content is, and because it's a kind of a compilation of breeds. I know that Brit Yarn will have this available, Isla over at Brit Yarn, and I think you can get it right from Blacker as well. So let me try again. I wasn't anticipating that little tangent, but here it is anyway. So it's their 10th birthday, and this will be the yarn that they use to celebrate it. It is 20% Camelot Alpaca, Hokaya, 10% Black Welsh Mountain, 10% Teeswater, 10% Shetland, 10% Mohair, 10% Jacob, 10% Gotland, and 10% Merino. The steely gray woolen spun yarn is blended from a collection of the highest quality British fibers. Cornish chin is a careful blend of lustrous, smooth fibers with slightly more bulky wools to create a lovely handle and give the yarn a delicate halo after blocking. This yarn is truly a limited edition and will only be made once. It's available in 4 colors and silver gray, which would be overdyed gray, and I am so excited about it. Anyway, I'm thinking I might knit Apostrophe by Kate Davies, which is this one, Chart for the Duck Business on the porch. I have one other sweater I was thinking of doing, but doing it in the gray and the turquoise colorway. So luckily I have a Sherpa who's coming to the retreat in October, so I will be shipping that to her and she'll bring it to me. And I have a couple other yarns I'm going to seek out, I think, and have sent to her. She doesn't know this yet, but there may be multiple packages. And I have another friend in Sweden who'll be bringing stuff for me as well, and there may be multiple packages. So that's Cornish tin, and great, that's where I want to be. So anyway, the whole purpose of that was to talk about socks. That I finished socks, I'll be putting new socks on the needles, and what yarn I'll be using for them, and hopefully I will be able to get Claire's pattern on the needles. All right, so that's it. Oh, let me tell you about my other finished projects. So I've been sewing. I had a, hi Chubbs, who's right there. I had a grandmother who was a garment maker, and I started sewing with her very young. And then I gave it up, and I never really got into it because I'm not a very precise person, and I think that that is a quality that stands out in sewing. But anyway, I keep saying that, and I'm very sorry. So, no pun intended, I thought I would work on some precision skills. Some of those being my top stitching, matching seams, etc. So I knit a couple bags. This is the first one. It's a full zipper, which I sewed a little bit close. They're box bags. And the inside is wood grain. I know. Beavers, wood grain. So I was quite happy with the way they turned out. They're not precise, but they will do, and from a distance they look like a bag, and I can enjoy the fabric instead of it sitting on my shelf. So I did that one. And then I did this little foxy, and I upgraded my Notions bag. It's a little bit bigger. And the inside I just used kind of I used interfacing on the one with the beavers, but on this one I just used kind of a heavy-duty cotton fabric on the inside. White, so I can see the stuff that I want to see. So there we go. I started to kind of pull in my sewing mojo with those two. And then I realized that, well, I can sew a straight line, and I have a sewing machine, and I have been talking about and wanting to make garments for myself. So now's the time. So I started with a pair of pajamas for my nephew, and he loves Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. And when you read it to him, he goes, no pigeon, no. No pigeon. What do we say to the pigeon? No pigeon. So that was probably enough no pigeons. Anyway, I knit him a pair of pajamas out of Mo Williams, who was the writer and illustrator, out of that fabric. So I got to learn a lot on this. I got to learn how to set in sleeves. But don't be fooled, I didn't do this by myself. I totally had an Obi-Wan Kenobi guide for sewing, which was Janie Estelle of Starcroft, who, luckily, her daughter owns an amazing fabric shop in Rockland called Clementine. And you can also access them online. So if you're interested in anything, she'll take a picture and send you the fabrics. Great service. And they're right in Rockland. So if you're traveling to Maine, you can stop in. She also is her exclusive yarns are Nash Island. So anyway, I know, I just did it again. So here is my little pajama top. I'm going to do snaps and then sew buttons over them so he can do it himself. And it has little pockets right here. And I thought I would make a little felt pigeon to put in the pocket. And then the pants are just to die for. Because you know why? I think it's the cuffs. Somebody just came in for a landing. So look at these little cuffs. You can let them down as they grow. So these are the little pants. And they have 2 different fabrics. So they have a complementary fabric on the waistband and a complementary fabric on the cuff. Now, I wouldn't say that I had a lot of fun doing this. I definitely needed some guidance. I did the pants all by myself, and I finished the shirt all by myself, but Janny was definitely there to help set in the sleeves. And as I finished all my seams, I was like, I'm getting a serger. So we'll see what happens with that. She had a good recommendation for a serger, so I'll do some more investigating. Now, I did not leave uninspired when I was over at Starcraft. She was like ultimate Obi-Wan moments. There are more coming with Starcraft. She set me up with Alabama Channing. Oh my God. If this woman combines all the things that I love, which includes hand embroidery and applique in a very kind of, or I don't think earthy is the right word, but a really folk art, modern look, and I just love it. So here's the dress that I want to do, and these are all knits. I can see my battery's going to die, so we'll just give it a minute, and then hopefully I can plug it in. I just wanted to make a note of the embroidery here, and this book includes the patterns and the stencil for the applique, but it has a multiple layers, so you can knit that dress, or you can start by knitting. You can sew that dress, or you can start by sewing the tank, which goes to a tunic, which goes to the dress. There's some other home goods in here. So I'm starting to build a concept for my wardrobe, which I think is going to be dresses and skirts, linen, wool, and cotton, and then layering of those to create different looks. So basic, neutral linen dresses, long sleeve, with aprons or underskirts that give just a pop of a really cool fabric, or, you know, some piece of element, some piece of flair. I'm also really getting into aprons, and I had texted a couple friends about sewing and building a wardrobe and who my inspirations are, and I'm like thinking modern Mary Poppins. I work with kids, and when you're hand making your clothes, and, you know, not that it's hard work, but why put your clothes through the wringer every day to be washed every day when you could just wear an apron, which is the same concept that we really used in Scotland, because we use coveralls. That's all, you just put coveralls on every day, and your clothes lasted, and you saved them from, I mean, not that I'll be dealing with sheep manure and, you know, other elements of sheep all over my clothing, but, you know, kids get, you know, their cheesy fingers all over you and stuff. So at least in my experience, they have. So anyway, Alabama Channing, I'm going to get some more of her books, but the beginnings of a sewn wardrobe for me. All right, I think that's all my finished objects. Let me get my show notes, which are so nicely organized next to me. I think I'm almost ready to move into Shackleton, the Shackleton along. Haha, okay. Yep. Okay, so Shackleton. Let me pause this before it stops recording. So I've plugged everything in. I also got an acquisition and a discovery in the mail, so it was worth stopping the recording. You can also see my show notes have kind of gone booskies, but we'll see. I think I'm heading into Shackleton, which is right here. So I'll start with my Shackleton project, and I know it's a very long pause. I'm not going to start with my project. I'm going to tell you that Joe of Shiny Bees and I have been chatting, and we're still working out particulars for how we want to do this. Now, technically, if we're going to mirror Shackleton's experience, we are still sailing to Buenos Aires. We don't get to Buenos Aires till October 26th, and I believe we depart for why can't I think of the name? George's Island. South Georgia Island, thank you. On December 5th, my husband was helping me with that. So we've got a little bit of time. It's all smooth sailing. And I've been looking through the thread, and the array of adventure that's happening there includes steeking, lace projects, charts, procuring a fleece, spinning, learning to spin, learning Fair Isle, knitting. I mean, it's the whole gamut of skill is represented. And people have really connected with this concept, and it's great. And I love seeing the diversity of epicness in the group. So with that in mind, Joe and I are working with some of these pieces. So if you have an idea you haven't posted in the thread, please do, because we're actually using some of that information to build out the craft along. So that being said, my Shackleton project originally started out as the Kate Davies Frost at Midnight lace pattern beaded yoke. And I had thought I was going to use Jagger spun merino silk lace, be perfect, and I knit a swatch and I cannot get gauge. Any way, shape, or form. I've gone up a needle size, and so, and I just wasn't digging it, and I wasn't connecting with it. So then I thought, well, I'll go up and I'll knit in a fingering weight. I'll go up a weight in yarn, because I didn't like the way the lace looked on a 3 with the way I was knitting. And so I started doing research on yarn. I couldn't really find anything that floated my boat. And I was worried if I went with the scrumptious lace, which was the original yarn this was knit in from Fiber Spates, that I wouldn't get gauged and I wouldn't be happy and I wouldn't have nowhere to go with it. So I was feeling really frustrated. I wasn't in the belly of the whale on the heroine's journey, but I had definitely met my first trial. And I had gone to Starcroft to work in the mill for a little while with Janny and do some sewing, and I was chatting with her about this, and my first guide appeared, and she said, why don't you design your own yarn here at Starcroft? And I was like, exactly. That's exactly what I should do. And so she has a couple of gray fleeces, one of which was Rodney's fleece, a special guy. And I'm going to create my own Nash Island silk base, which will be called Shackleton. So I'll have the Shackleton base. I will most likely knit it in the original color of a really beautiful silver gray, and maybe use like a frosty bead, blue bead, for the yoke. That remains to be seen. But we are going to run this base, and hopefully we will have enough to release to the public. So, I know I went from anyway to so. It's my segue. It's my transition word. The intent, therefore, is not, I can't start it now. And last time I was there, it was too hot to wash fleeces. So she and I are trying to get organized and on a schedule on when we're going to do this. But that is going to be my Shackleton. Not only will it be knitting this sweater in that gauge and beading the yoke with 1,800 beads, but I will also design my own yarn to do it. And I did say, did I say that it'll be a silk base? It'll be probably a 70-30 light fingering. So exciting, exciting stuff. And I would encourage you to find your guides, if you will, very similar to what Joseph Campbell, and I think I forgot to to give a little background on Joseph Campbell when I spoke last time. So Joseph Campbell was a mythologist and a professor at Sarah Lawrence University, and has written a number of books and consulted with Spielberg on Star Wars and etc. So that's kind of his background, and I'm sorry I didn't give a little bit more information, just launched into a Joseph Campbell tirade, and one of my personal heroes. So I was so excited to build out my Shackleton a little bit more, with a little bit more challenging skill. So stay tuned for more about that. My husband is participating in the Shackleton Along. He wants to knit a traditional Canadian toque, and that, when I say that, it has a specific shape, kind of goes up and turns over. At least that's the toque I'm familiar with, like the Voyageurs. And he is going to be using Upton yarns, and we just received it in the mail today. So he's going to do the main body out of this silver gray. I know, he and I were made for each other, right? And he'll be doing a trim, light trim, just around the head out of this kind of cranberry red. This is her Gansey yarn, and she says suggested needle size is US 0 to 2, and this is 2015 silver. Gauge is 29 stitches to 34 stitches to 4 inches. So Rob will be knitting this on a size 2, most likely, or 3. He's a pretty tight knitter, and that's going to be his Shackleton. He's never knitted on anything that small, and we'll also be using a pattern from Ravelry, which is for worsted weight. We're going to redo the numbers. So Rob, this is a 5-ply, by the way. So Rob's really excited that the yarn came today. I am unfortunately leaving for another 4 days. I have to go to a retreat for people with aphasia. And so I will be leaving him with his yarn, but no project started. I think he's a little bit bummed about that. What else for Shackleton? Oh, textiles and time. So, I'm sorry. I'm going to insert a small piece about Shackleton, like I said, in his original intent. But I was alerted to by Daisy Knitter on the threads. About a project called Hat Fit for a Hero. As part of our upcoming exhibition, Antarctica Explorers, Heroes, and Scientists, Palace Green Library is seeking craft enthusiasts to make hats fit for heroes inspired by Antarctic explorers. The hats will be sold in a run-up to Christmas. All proceeds will be donated to Walking with the Wounded's Head Start program, with Barclays Bank kindly agreeing to match the fund the first £1,000 raised. Walking with the Wounded is a charity supporting injured servicemen and women. Their Head Start initiative helps those with mental injury. The charity organized a trek across the Antarctic in 2013. So there is a Shackleton and a Tom Crean hat. Both of them, Tom Crean was I believe she said it was the second officer on Shackleton's expedition, the Endurance. And their designs in here are by Angela Magara and Jane Carroll. Have provided patterns based on the original hats that they wore on their endeavors. So Tom Crean, Daisy Knitter writes about here, who is the man in the poster. He was an Antarctic explorer, originally from Ireland, and he first traveled to the Antarctic with Shackleton in 1901. In 1911, he set off with Captain Scott on the infamous Terra Nova expedition to the South Pole. During this trip, he walked 35 miles alone across the ice to rescue a fellow explorer, an act which won him the Albert Medal for life-saving on his return to Britain. Not deterred by the hardship of the expedition, he set off a third time to the Antarctic in 1914, this time as Shackleton's second officer. Well liked by the men and particularly fond of the team of sled dogs under his charge, he was remembered for being an Irishman with a fund of wit and an even temper which nothing disturbed. She's going to knit a hat as for her Shackleton Along, and that is certainly providential and correlate, and so please, if this is something that interests you, or you want to knit a portfolio of Arctic Explorer hats, you can look on Ravelry, and I will link this. Let me see. She has, Angela Magara has a Cousteau, she has a Shackleton, she has, let me look. the Tom Crean hat. The sunlight is reflecting on this. She has Roosevelt, Shackleton, Cousteau, Kingsley, Meissner, Hillary. I think those are her explorers. So there's a number of explorers. You could knit that whole section as a portfolio. I was chatting with a sampler girl, BZ Mama, and she knit a shawl with chart work, and which was a challenge for her. And she's done. And she's like, I guess I need to pick something more epic. But you really don't. You could create a portfolio of projects. So if you wanted to knit a whole series of charted lace, and it's a masterwork, a portfolio representative of something. If you want to knit all these explorer hats or research your own, Sarah Lake of Upton Yarns and I were chatting about this. And looking at the materials and the designs of the sweaters used on the expedition, I would love more information about that. So we've talked a little bit about that possibility too. So there's a lot of places you could go with this. And I know it's kind of Shackleton all the time, but it lends itself so wonderfully to textiles and time and adventure and curiosity. It definitely, I'm curious and hungry for more. So yeah, I appreciate all of the interest in the chatter. Let's see. I think that is it for me. I am going to insert the last little bit of Shackleton here, which is got some pictures of Shackleton, the map, and the dogs, and the Endeavour. And then I have, at the very end, a little ditty about our canoe trip on Flagstaff Lake, like I said, where you can see some wildlife. I think that's it for me. And I just realized that I think my shirt's on inside out. You can see my seams. Anyway, I'm not re-recording. I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
In Shackleton's own words, quote, after the conquest of the South Pole by Edmundson, who, by a narrow margin of days only, was in advance of the British expedition under Scott, there remained but one great main object of Antarctic journeying, the crossing of the South Polar Continent from sea to sea. When Shackleton returned from the Nimrod expedition, on which an attempt was made to plant the British flag on the South Pole, attention was turned towards the crossing of the continent, as Shackleton felt certain that either Edmundson or Scott would succeed where he had failed, just 97 miles from his goal. Shackleton felt that the first crossing of the Antarctic continent from sea to sea via the pole, apart from its historic value, would be a journey of great scientific importance. The distance would be roughly 1,800 miles, and the first half of this, from the Weddell Sea to the pole, would be over unexplored territory. Shackleton intended on taking continuous magnetic observations as the glaciologist and geologist studied ice formations and the mountains of Victoria Land. While the Transcontinental Party worked its way across the continent, other scientific parties would operate from the base on the Weddell Sea. One sledging party would travel towards Graham Land, making observations and collecting geological specimens, while another party would travel eastward towards Enderby Land, conducting the same types of studies. A third party would remain at the base to study the fauna of the land and sea and the meteorological conditions. From the Ross Sea base in McMurdo Sound, another party would push southward to await the arrival of the Transcontinental Party at the top of the Beadmore Glacier. 2 ships were required for the expedition. The Endurance would be used to transport the Transcontinental Party to the Weddell Sea and would afterwards explore the shores of the coastline. She was constructed at Sandefjord by the famous Norwegian builder Christensen. She was barkentine-rigged and had barkentine. I know Sarah Upton is like freaking out about my pronunciation of that. She was barkentine-rigged and had triple expansion engines, which gave her a speed under steam of 9 to 10 knots. Some 350 tons, she was built of selected pine, oak, and greenheart. Fully equipped, she cost the expedition £14,000. Aurora, the ship used to take out the Ross Sea Party, was purchased from Douglas Mawson. She was very similar to the Terra Nova of Scott's expedition. Preparations were started in the middle of 1913, but no public announcement was made until January 13, 1914. After the announcement, Shackleton was flooded with applications from eager members of the community to join the adventure. Nearly 5,000 applications were received, from which 56 men were picked. In March, the promised financial help fell through, so Shackleton immediately set about appealing for help. The funds were raised to complete the purchase, with the largest contributors being the late Sir James Caird, £24,000, the British government £10,000, and the Royal Geographical Society £1,000. Most of the public schools of England and Scotland helped the expedition to purchase the dog teams. Each dog was named after a school that contributed. The Aurora was purchased, and Mackintosh was sent to Australia.